Mr. Sassone, thank you for taking time out this afternoon to talk to us about your experiences with basketball here at St. Bonaventure. What we wanted to start with today is I've done my history on you, and I just want to know what the recruiting process was back in the late 40s. How did you end up playing basketball at St. Bonaventure?
Well, there was only generally one coach at every college, unless it was a large school like St. John's City College, and I was from that area. And generally they sent you letters, invited you over, took you in a gym, let you show your prowess, and that's what we did. I had scholarships to a great many schools because I was an all-city basketball player, first team. My high school won 22-0 and won the New York City championship. And for the 4 years I was there, we had a 71-3 record. So I had a good curriculum vitae as far as basketball is concerned. When Coach Melvin asked you to come out here, did he pay for maybe a train ticket or? Well, actually, they did pay. Coach Melvin came to the Garden. He met Coach Mickey Fisher from Boys High and asked to be introduced to me. And they didn't do it for everyone. Okay. But the people they wanted very badly, they did it for. For example, the day I came up in May of '49, there were only two fellows, high school fellows, being recruited. One was Ted Marchibroda, who went on to become a pro football player and a coach, and now he does TV work, and myself. And they just showed us the campus and said, go where you want, and so forth. And they only forgot to tell us one thing. Dinner was at 6. And we were walking around somewhere, and someone said, how was dinner? And we said, no one told us about dinner. So you get the low key. Yeah. That's the way it was. The campus then was made up of a great many two-story Army barracks and one-story tin Army barracks, and they were recreation rooms. And we all stayed in the dorms. And as I said, we had to study every night from 7 to 10 with a priest walking up and down the hall. So some of us would occasionally go to the library because it was a different atmosphere, and it was also a way to get off campus. And it was used by many that way.
Just talk about your early years. Talk about some of the guys you played with, like Fred and Leo and all the guys that you played with. What was it like? Talk about the transition playing.
If I may start a little further back.
Okay, no, absolutely.
What has not ever been noted, it was noted that basketball came about because they dropped football. Yeah. That wasn't true. That was on the activities, file. Yeah. Actually, what happened is after the war, guys came back that played in 41-42, and they played on a 46 team with Father Anselm Cougar, who was an All-American at Providence College. Father Anselm got sick, and actually there were two guys I knew, Ed Butler from Olean, a real estate man, still here, and Steve Sipot. And Steve had played in 41, 42, and 46. And when Father Anselm got sick, they didn't hire a coach. They just took the oldest guy on the team. And so at the end of the year, Steve Sipot came in. Okay. And that was right at the end of the war. Then, at that point, they went out and they hired a coach. Okay. A coach from New Jersey by the name of Harry Singleton. Okay. Harry Singleton was from a good basketball high school. He brought about 8, 9 kids back to Bonaventure to play basketball. Amongst them were Eddie Donovan, who later was my freshman coach, and I was his assistant coach at Bonas, and he went on to the Knickerbockers as a coach and general manager. Another guy that was brought in about that time was Chuck Daly. Chuck Daly went on to be the top NBA coach with the Detroit Pistons. The rumor was that Chuck couldn't play defense and he left Bonaventure. Actually, they brought in under Singleton, he brought in a great number of players. And he left. I never found the reason why he left after 1 year. He was a math teacher and a basketball coach. They went out and hired Ed Melvin, Milkovich. It's a Serbian from Yugoslavia name, and I'm familiar with that because I've coached over there. Milkovich added about 8 or 9 players, so now they're dealing with about 16 or 17 players in 47, 48. It got so crowded, the players that were picked up by Singleton were very good. One of them went on to play pro ball, Kenny Murray. Another one went on to be national amateur golf champion, Sam Urzetta. And they had a very representative group that was left behind. Milkovich went out and got 8 or 9 more guys. And it got very crowded here. So in those 2 years, they brought near 20 guys in, which is a large amount of players. They relied on players coming from other schools like Villanova, Princeton, Rutgers, people who went to those schools and didn't like it. And in those days, you could just move, and so he got a great, a number of players that way. He also picked up from the student body Leo Corkery from Jamestown and Bill Kenville, who played with me. Bill Kenville went on to be an NBA player and played in the finals of the NBA at Syracuse, and they won the national championship of the NBA with Bill Kenville. And that was also his graduating year was the only year in Bonnie's history where 4 players were chosen for the pros. Then, so we had a lot of guys. When I come in 49-50, a number of the players dropped off the team because there was just too many players. Now, in 49, they went to the National Catholic Invitation Tournament. Kenny Murray was the leading scorer, Frank Reddy, Sam Urzetta. In 49-50, in my freshman year, a number of the players that were on the team, because they had so many, left. And they were pretty good players. They were all from New Jersey, and they were good caliber players, but you had to pick the best, and some of them flunked out. Chuck Daly was one of those. Billy Kenville actually was a player, but he dropped out at mid-semester his freshman year and came back the next year, and he walked in as a walk-on and got a scholarship, the same as Leo Corkery did. Then Milkovich went on to recruit in 1949-50 another large group of people. Sorry, let me get back to 47, 48, 46, 48. Milkovich was from Pittsburgh, so he went down there and he got Owen Gorman, Kaz Konietzka, Paul Mackey. They were big, strong guys. They were looking for rebounders. And so we had a real good team, contrary to what is thought, that football was the only thing. Bonaventure at that time was promoting basketball, but they were not doing it with football players. After the war, they were doing it with basketball players. One of the basketball players from St. Bonaventure is a guy by the name of Frank LoVuolo. He played football at Bonaventure. He was drafted by the New York Football Giants and played a number of years for the New York Football Giants. We had a good number of players, obviously, in football, but we also had basketball players going on to the pros. And so in 49-50, Eddie Donovan won his junior year. He asked Ed Milkovich, if he could be the freshman coach next year instead of playing. He was probably 28, 29 years old, had been in the Navy for 4 or 5 years during World War II. And Eddie became the basketball coach, and as with many Bonnie students, he ended up marrying a girl by the name of Marjorie Whalen, and I did the same thing. I married a girl from Olean, and there's a great many Bonnie students in Olean who married girls in Olean. So 49-50, they had a little letdown. They didn't go to any tournament. And Kenny Murray, Sam Urzetta, Frank Reddy, and those guys all left. The only one that was left was their big man, Fred Diute from Binghamton. Well, Fred, plus Don Selinsky, Leo Corkery, Owen Gorman, Kaz Konietzka, those guys, we come in as sophomores and played with them. And that sophomore year was my sophomore year, and what happened is that two of us started, Bill Kenville and myself, started as sophomores with three older guys, and so we had a well-balanced team between young guys and we had big guys, and we, the guys that played with me, they come in with me, like Mike Bednar, they were like what we used to call the firemen. They'd come off the bench. And we had Roger Davies, who was the most outstanding shooter on the team, but was somewhat down in defense, so he was only brought in for offensive situations, and he just was a magnificent shooter. We had a good year. We had 6 overtime games in our sophomore year. We won every one. The last one was in Villanova at Philadelphia, and after we beat Villanova, that put us over the top as a choice for an NIT invite. Now, an NIT invite in 1950-51, you were going to the heights of basketball in the United States. Madison Square Garden was the mecca of basketball. Everyone came from the West, played in Buffalo, played in New York, and then went home. So we were in a tournament, and we played Cincinnati. Tony Trabert was playing me. I was the leading scorer, and he was the leading defensive. And Tony Trabert is probably unfamiliar, but he was a great professional tennis player. And we won our first game in the Garden in a triple overtime. So that was the 7th game that we had won in overtime. And then we ran up. We did very well. I think that was right after that we played St. John's. No?
No, I think it is St. John's. We have the notes right here. This is the media guide.
Right.
And this has you guys lost to St. John's.
60-58.
Yep.
And that was a crybaby for me because I played ball against all the guys from St. John's. I had a scholarship to St. John's. The day I left for Bonaventure, they called me from St. John's and said, "Today's your registration day." And I said, "Well, I'll be there," but I took the train to Olean. And it was the best choice I ever made in my life. It worked out much better than staying in New York City. So we were one of the top 16 teams in the nation, and the NCAA was an afterthought. They would have like an 8-team tournament or a 4-team tournament out in the Midwest. And no one went, to the NCAAs from New York. It wasn't a big tournament. So the next year, which would be 51-52, we had another good year. I was the leading scorer both years, the first 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean I was a big shot. I mean, that means in those days you averaged 13 points, and the guy next had 11, the guy next had 10, 9, 8. We were not a star team. We were talented, but we didn't have the ball go to one person. And so we had the seniors, Don Selinsky, we had Owen Gorman, we had Leo Corkery in our 1951, and they were all great players. They graduated. So now in 51-52, they were back for their senior year and our junior year. And we had another great tournament. Actually, what happened was that our first big win ever was out at Bradley in Peoria, Illinois. They were one of the top teams in the nation in 1950, and we went out to play them there, and we beat them by 17 points. So our ratings nationwide, we were rated, quite high. In the year of 1951-52, we went 16-0, and Duquesne was 16-0. And we ended up playing Duquesne, and it was televised. I think it was a nationwide television. I can't think of the guy who did it. And it was done from the Trolley Gardens in Pittsburgh. Those who are older know the Trolley Garden, and it's where they parked them years ago. But then they put an ice under it, and we played basketball there. Well, we lost to them by 6 points, and we lost to St. John's the next night, and then we got back on, and we got invited again to play in the NIT. I think that in the next NIT, I'm trying to recall. Can you hold it up one second? We played Western Kentucky. I know.
Yeah, you beat Western Kentucky 70-69. Then you lost to Dayton 69-62 when you beat Duquesne in the consolation game 48-31.
48-31.
Yeah.
There's a great story behind that. We took the Duquesne players out that night, the night before the game. I guess they didn't know how to celebrate well, and they didn't play well the next day, and it was a usual thing to do. You would be friendly with guys. You were both in a third-place game, and you're in New York with a lot to do. Duquesne had two of the best players in the nation. They were both black. They were both 6'9", and they both went on to play pro. Duquesne was one of the top teams in the nation. At the time we were 16-0, we were second, third, or fourth in the nation, and Duquesne was right up there with us. So that was the situation up through 52. Well, we lost the seniors, and our senior year, we had 5 seniors. And if you're a basketball coach, the worst thing you can have is 5 seniors. And we dropped from a national team to a team that went 11-11. But in spite of going 11-11, Bill Kenville, Mike Bednar, Bill Edwards, and myself were all drafted by the pros. And the man who took the blame for going 11-11 was the coach. He was fired. Don't ask me why. I was a young kid. I didn't understand it, but so they hired Eddie Donovan, Father Silas Rooney, whose brother Art Rooney owned the Steelers. He decided that he, along with his right-hand man, Jack Ritzenthaler, who was the PR man, we didn't have SIDs then, we had a PR man. He was PR man for the school, all the academics, all the athletics, and according to Jack, they were driving uptown, and Father Silas said, well, Jack, who are we going to get? We need a coach. And you had to know Father Silas. He was a great friend of mine. And he says, well, you're 2 blocks from a coach. And he looked at Jack and said, who? He says, Eddie Donovan. He's coaching there at Olean High School. He just won a sectional championship. Natural. So we went to Eddie Donovan. And, of course, I worked with Eddie for the NIT, NCAA games right up through 1961. And in 61, Eddie left for New York, and Larry Weise was hired to be the head coach. Larry had played for Eddie. And naturally, Eddie was of the feeling that we got more out of playing in the NIT than the NCAA. And the reason was playing in the Garden, you got more publicity. It made the opportunity to recruit in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, where we were getting all our players. And in doing that, he made a good friend of Ned Irish, who was the head of the Garden basketball program. So that loyalty to the NIT by Bonaventure led to Eddie Donovan taking over as a basketball coach
with the Knicks,
with the New York Knickerbockers. I had the pleasure of scouting for him.
What was that like? Like, what kind of differences? What did you look for when you end up being a scout for a professional team?
Scouting for professional teams was helter-skelter. They hired guys in different cities, and you went out. I went to see George Gervin play up in Buffalo. He played, I can't think of his team, and Randy Smith, who played for the Buffalo Braves. That would be one example, and I would write up 2 scouting reports, one for both teams. And I'd FedEx it, and the next day, the basketball coach then at the Knicks, he was 6'11", he was on the, what was his name? Oh my goodness. Willis Reed. Willis Reed would call me and go over the scouting report, and it was funny. It was my first scouting, and he wasn't sure I knew what I was talking about, and he asked Eddie, does he know what he's saying they're doing? And Eddie said, take my word, he knows. So they beat George Gervin's team. That was San Antonio. Yeah. And they lost to Buffalo, the poor team. So I did another scouting report, and I said, before we do this report, I want to know how come you guys could beat George Gervin and San Antonio and lose to the Buffalo Braves. He said, it's just like high school kids. It goes to their head winning a big game, and they go backwards the next game. And Willis was very nice. I also knew the other coach very well from the Knicks, Red Holtzman. He had actually played a basketball game up here when he was a professional with the Rochester Royals. Red was playing, and the 2 other guards I remember that I played against were Davies and it was a funny game because we had Olean referees, and the referee, one of the Royals went up to shoot a foul shot, and he kept bouncing the ball, and the referee went over and said, it's 10 seconds, I'm taking the ball away, you don't get your foul shot. Well, that led to the whole bench coming off the Rochester Royals. They beat us. They beat us like 88-86. And we used to scrimmage them. It was legal in those days. We'd go up to Rochester and scrimmage them. So that was, the recruiting was good. Through that and through coaching I coached with Eddie Donovan. I coached with Larry Weise. I coached with Jimmy Satalin. I recruited Jimmy Barron, who became a coach. Yeah. And whenever anyone asked me, how do you get a coach? I said, you get a guy that graduated from Bona that played basketball there. Because the most successful coaches in our history were 4 Bonaventure guys.
Absolutely. Can you just, during your playing days, can you describe what it was like to play, like, in the Armory and in the Memorial Auditorium and in Madison Square Garden? Like, what was the feeling on game day on campus? Like, can you describe that for us?
Well, there was a time, believe it or not, when Eddie first started coaching, when they'd have a bonfire and Eddie lost a couple of games, so they hung him. Of course, he overcame all of that. But in the days at Bonaventure, there was always a lot of activities. When I first came, there was TGIF, which meant barrels of beer down on the river. And of course, that you weren't supposed to drink on campus, but that's the way it was. But the Armory was a very small place. It was sold out every game. You played in a pail of blue smoke, because at that time everyone smoked, and it was blue, and the sidelines were the feet of the people seated there were on the court, and at one end of the court was a set of bleachers, and if you shot a layup and went in like the opposing team, sometimes they didn't get out of the bleachers. Fans would hold on to them, and we'd go off on a fast break, and here'd be this guy, coming behind. The tickets were gold to get there, but then later on they started to have a great many things in Bonaventure in terms of supporting. I guess I should mention that there were food fights the night of a game, which were looked askance at, of course, by people. There was drinking, not on campus, but they'd go off campus and have a few beers and go to the Armory. And in those days, we had to be back by 12 o'clock at night. Can you imagine that? One night a week out to 12, one night a week out at 1, and 7 to 10 studying every night. The fans were always great. When it got to the Lanier period, of course, when we had Tom Stith and Sam Stith, we were up on the top of the nation. And to digress a bit, the first time we started to go down was when we had 3 black basketball players: Tom Stith, Sam Stith, Freddie Crawford. Oh no, 4. Barry Herbert. And we were amongst the first to have basketball players, black basketball players in the nation. And that was because the Franciscan Brothers in Brooklyn were a pipeline to giving us Sam Stith and Tom Stith. And Freddie Crawford, Herbert, Barry Herbert, Whitey Martin. We always got good guards from Buffalo, and Whitey Martin, of course, was one of the best ever. So we were going along very well, and there were a lot of things. One thing they did in the Lanier period is they used to bring out a bunch of guys with a coffin, and in the coffin was a figure, and they brought it out to dirge music, and everyone went on, like did a dirge, and then they opened it up and they stabbed the Bradley Indian and ran off the court. And at that period also they played, the theme for the team was Wading in the Water by Ramsey Lewis Jr. When that come on, we also had at the game a local musician, Louis Russo, who was a great singer. And he would, at halftime, put on a singing show, and all the students loved one song. When he started, they all joined in. The song was New York, New York. What a wonderful town. And Louis did that for years. He also sang for a Yankee ball game up in Toronto. He was kind of baritone like Sinatra. And the feeling downtown was that the biggest thing in our area is St. Bonaventure basketball. Yeah. You would go to the Auditorium, and Saturday night we would play there. We would stay in a hotel in the afternoon, go to the Auditorium, and what happened was a team that was going to play in Madison Square Garden would play Thursday in Buffalo. And there would be 2 teams in Buffalo, and there would be 2 other teams from the far west playing in the Garden. And so, to give you an example, on a Saturday night, we played West Kentucky. Now, West Kentucky was a great team, but Kentucky would never play them because they had a great day. Well, West Kentucky beat St. John's, and we would play them Saturday night and catch them, on the road and a little tired.
Yeah.
And we beat Western Kentucky. Well, you had the highest seats were the Grays, and they were filled. The best seats were the Browns, and they were right along the floor. But strategically, Canisius placed all of their students in these Browns to harass us. And there was a great deal of harassing. When we would go out at halftime, they'd hit us with things, throw things at us, spit at us. I mean, it was unbelievable. Well, what happened is Canisius found they could make more money by moving the students. That would solve one problem, and raising the price of the Browns because they were on the floor.
Yeah.
And the students of Canisius didn't like it, but they were moved out of the way. Standing room only was 12.5, and most of the times it was 12.5. We would always, because Canisius was the people who were putting on the show, so to speak. Doc Crowdle from Canisius was the graduate athletic manager, and he worked with Ned Irish, and they set the schedules up. So we would go in there, and there'd be 12.5, and there'd be standing room only around the Reds. You had the Browns, the Reds, then you had a place to walk around, and you had the Blues, then you had the Grays. And we used to regularly draw 500 people. Niagara had good teams. Niagara had teams along that time with Larry Costello, and he went on to be a pro. U.B. Brown was there, a friend of mine, a friend of my brother's, and Frank Layden, who I played against in high school. They had great teams there, and U.B. went on to the pros, and so did Frank later. But it was a very tough seat to get. It was very tough to get. I mean, they were scalping tickets outside, and the floor, it was a beautiful place, Memorial Auditorium. It was actually nicer than the old Garden. The old Garden had rafters on the side. It was on 49th Street, and everything went straight up, and you had like 4 different levels, and the auditorium was like a bowl.
Really?
And it was a much nicer place to play. And in those days, our biggest adversaries were Little Three, Canisius and Niagara. If you didn't beat them, people were upset. I mean, they got really vociferous and loud and angry and really yelling at the Canisius-Niagara games. More so funny, there was more animosity between Canisius and Bonnies than there was between Bonnies and Niagara. We didn't view them as you had to view Canisius, because everyone down here, Canisius was the enemy. And Niagara, on the other hand, had the same adversarial relationship with Canisius that we did, but when we played each other, it was, I remember playing in the, what they call the Gallagher Center, which is still operating up there at Niagara. And at that time, they had, when we first came, U.B. Brown was playing. He had played against my brother in high school, and Frank Layden was playing. And then they got Larry Costello and a few other players, and they, right after Bonaventure went to the Heights, they went to the Heights right after 53, and they were in tournaments all the time. It was a great place to play, but when you walked out of the auditorium, the wind chill would knock you off your feet. It was so cold outside that auditorium in the winter. People have scarves across their face, and they'd be walking back to hotels or walking to trolley cars. And the student body went to the Lafayette Hotel to celebrate, and they did a lot of celebrating. It was a downtown hotel. It was about, I'd say, 6 miles from the arena, and it was up on Main Street. And I think the Hotel Lafayette is still there.
Yeah.
So, in addition, we would have 12 to 15 buses going from Olean to the games in Buffalo. The students loved it because they got off campus and stayed with their friends in Buffalo. So they got out, what they would do is they'd leave Friday night, go to their friends in Buffalo, and go out Friday night. Then they'd go out Saturday and celebrate, and then after the game. There was a lot of, this place was almost like a seminary when we were here. And when they got off campus, they did what they were not supposed to do on campus, which was frequent all the establishments that had alcohol. Luckily, we never had I can't recall anyone driving back through the snow on Saturday nights. They always stayed till Sunday. The only bad thing that ever happened playing in Buffalo is we were going to play Niagara one time, and Niagara came down here with an airplane to bomb the campus with leaflets.
Oh, really?
And I don't recall if the leaflets got here or not, but the plane crashed and killed 2 Niagara students. Louis Magnano, who just put up the dining hall over here this week in the papers, he was a bus driver. His father owned a bus line, and Louis was the team bus driver wherever he'd go. And he just donated some $2 million, I guess, for the dining hall.
Yeah, it looks beautiful over there.
Yeah. Well, Louis has done a lot for Olean and a lot for Bonaventure. And he started with his father in the taxi business, and Louis drove the charter buses, and he built that up, and then he became a developer, and he's a leading light and a very approachable man.
Describe your playing relationship with Coach Melvin or Coach Milkovich, because I looked through some old programs, and it said that when you and him kind of butted heads on the fact that you ate so much and whatnot.
Well, what happened was my freshman year, after basketball season went over, contrary to what most people thought, I thought the food was great in the dining hall. And I went from 200 to 221. And so he told me, don't come back if you're 221. So I got a job in a laundry in Queens, New York, and I worked on a mangle taking sheets, and I went from 221 to 180. And when I came back, I was in great shape. And as I told you, I was the leading scorer. I was the point guard, but we had a very good team. It wasn't one man. It wasn't a one-man team. Billy Kenville was quite good. Mike Bednar, the guys that came on with me, Roger Davies, Leo Corkery, Freddie Diute. I mean, we had good players, but I guess the only word we could cover him, he was overbearing. He was discipline was the number one thing, and he constantly went after you verbally. He was very tough to play with. But he had a redeeming feature. He was a great basketball coach. He knew basketball, and Billy Kenville said he played in the pros. His best coach ever was Ed Melvin at St. Bonaventure. He was a tremendous coach, and it was sad that they let him go, but he did pretty well out of Toledo after that. And of course, when I came back at 180, he kissed me. I was out of shape, and I've always had a tendency to be heavy. He could be. He would say things openly to you in practice and said, "You guys are nothing. You're not talented. I'm the talent here. What I teach you is the best. We are the best. Our plays are the best." And he was greatly egotistical, and he would be very difficult to get along with. I mean, he would stop practice and scream at you. I mean, he'd go nose to nose with you, screaming at you. Never swore or anything. And we were afraid of him, but I learned one thing from him that I still carry in my life. He used to say, practice is at 3 o'clock. what time are you going to be on the floor? And we'd all say, 2:45. He says, okay. To this day, I always arrive early, 15 minutes early, unless you have to park, as I did today, and walk a distance. But he was a great coach. I had a great high school coach, and the plays we ran in high school were very similar to the plays at Bonaventure. So when I come in, I was way ahead of the rest of the team. I knew all the plays. I knew what to do. I knew the fakes. He was very adamant about certain things in the game. Whenever you do something, you fake. Don't do anything. And he says, I want to hear your foot hear the floor. And if you didn't hear your foot hear the floor, he'd scream at you. What he was teaching you in faking was to watch your defensive man and see where he was. If he was in the wrong position, you cut to the basket. And when you cut, you didn't walk. You ran. Let me tell you, Pete Carrill coaches like him. Pete Carrill from Princeton, and a pro coach, he runs the same kind of offense that we ran. And you had two choices when you faked. You faked and cut to the basket, or you faked and went back out and got the ball from a guy. Then he would fake. He had to fake. And before he faked, if he faked, he would go one way or the other. If he faked and he could run behind the guy, he ran behind him. If he faked and the guy moved, he ran in front of him. If he ran in front of him, we threw him the ball. It was a very simple offense once you learned it. And it was based on fundamentals. He was great at fundamentals. He was great at teaching defense. When we came here, anyone that drove down to the basket down the middle of the floor was supposed to be on the floor, not walking as he went through. We were somewhat rough. But he always said, pick him up and whisper to him, you're going to get it again. And so we had an exceptionally, he was very well known as a fundamentalist. And if you did what he said, everything worked out. Unfortunately, the last year, he wasn't that way. I don't know what happened, but he was no longer teaching us fundamentals, and he expected we would know them. And you had to run it. You had to. Yeah. We had a variety of plays. We'd call a weak side play, which was very much like what Bobby Knight ran at Indiana. We would call a second man, and the second man was a pivot play, and it would be set up by two passes, and then our big men would go into the low post, and then there was what he called a play called a reverse. If the floor was overloaded, and you saw, you had 8 guys over here, you had to reverse it to the one man over here, and he would go one-on-one, and you had the whole half of the court. My high school coach was the same way. I watch basketball today, and I watch the pros, and I've always said I was going to write UB Brown and ask them why they don't play defense. I've never written, but college today is more offense than defense. But Milkovich's idea was that defense remains the same. You give up 52 points every game, but you never know if you're going to score 52. So if you can control their offense, then all you have to do, if we let them get 50, that we can get 60. And that's the way he operated. He had some bad breaks. He would have made a great coach, but what probably held him back was his temper and his egotism. I mean, he would tell other coaches, "You guys can't beat us." You know, you don't hear any coach ever say that anymore, but he just tried to put the whammy on him.
You said you were drafted. What led you to coaching instead of continuing your professional career in basketball?
Well, there were two drafts in 1953, the Korean War and the NBA. I was drafted in the first 32 players in the NBA by Philadelphia. There were eight first-round picks and 8 second round, and I was drafted by Philadelphia. Mike Bednar was drafted by Philadelphia. No, not by Philadelphia. Billy Edwards was drafted, and Bill Kenville was drafted. And 3 of us went to the Army, and the other 2 wanted to play pro ball. And Kenville played a number of years and played with a national, NBA champion. So I got in the Army and I became a basketball coach. Not only did I become a basketball coach, but I became a baseball coach. I put a guy on my basketball team by the name of Billy Martin, who was just the MVP of the New York Yankees in the World Series, and he went in the Army. And he was on our basketball team, and I learned how to coach baseball from him. 2 years, and 2 years later, when I went back to Philadelphia, they just said, "Look, we've got 2 kids from Villanova. They'll draw more fans than you, so your time went by." So I worked in Philly, and Eddie called me. Said, "Come on, I'm going to take you out to this great eating place." I can't think of the name of it, but it was the prime restaurant in Philly, and asked me if I ever thought of coaching, and I said, "Yeah, but I got a job at United Parcel, it pays well." And I said, what would the coaching involve, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, "Well, we don't pay assistants, but you can get your GI Bill, and you can live on that." I was married, my wife was pregnant, my wife was working, and so I came up here and I did my graduate work in European history and Latin American history. And did my graduate work later in counseling, got a master's in that. I didn't get it in history. And I became Eddie's assistant. Most people don't know this, but in 1956-57, that was Eddie's 4th year as basketball coach at Bonaventure. And I said, "Any chance of me getting a full-time job here next year?" He says, "Sass, I had a 3-year contract. When that was over, they gave me a 1-year contract. You know what that means?" I says, "Yeah, you either win or you're out." He was on a 1-year contract. I was his assistant coach. I was his scout, and I wasn't getting, all I got was my GI Bill and occasionally a meal at the dining hall. And so we won. We went to the NIT. They didn't hire me here. They didn't have a full-time assistant coach. So I went to coach in high school, and I was successful in high school. At 2 high schools, I won a Western New York championship at Olean High School, and that was 1968. Was that 1968? Yeah, it was 1968. In 61, I applied for the Bonaventure job when Eddie left, and the president obviously chose Larry Weise to be the coach. He was a junior high coach, which was amazing. And what happened was Larry had some problems, and they were looking to hire a new coach, and I knew the president of the university, and he called me in. His name was Father Francis William Carney. I was his altar boy, and I lived in his barracks. And they were going to put Larry on a 1-year contract because he wasn't doing well enough. he asked me what I thought about Larry's coaching, and I said, Father, I'm not going to tell you a thing about his coaching. He said, well, is he a good coach or a bad coach? You know, that's what I want to know. I said, well, what I'm going to tell you is that your former president went out and hired a junior high school coach with no ability because you saw things in him that you liked, obviously. And you have to give him at least 5 years to see whether he's going to become a coach. So, and I said, Father, you really owe him 2 more years because you took a kid from nowhere. And he said, Bob, you're right. I'm glad you told me that. There are a lot of people on campus telling me to get rid of Larry. And then Larry asked me to become his assistant in 1968 when Bonaventure was under NCAA sanction. And so I became Larry's assistant, and I've been here quite a few years. You know, I was with Larry, then I was with Jimmy Satalin. I stayed with him. Then I was with O'Brien, and after 1 year I resigned. Never want to say why I resigned, but it wasn't what I wanted at that point. I was fortunate in coaching because I ended up, when we won the NIT in 1977, most of those guys were guys I recruited. Essie, Hollis, Greg Sanders. Who else? Oh boy, they were the 2 best. Glenn Hagan, no, he was recruited by Billy. Nick Urzetta, I recruited. Billy and I recruited, but I was the first one to get Jimmy Barron. First 2 I recruited with Jimmy Barron and Essie Hollis. Then the next year I recruited Greg Sanders. I was then Billy came on and he started recruiting. And as a result of that, we went to Yugoslavia to play basketball as representatives of the United States. At that point, we were being considered for the Big East, along with, because we played all the Big East teams. And we played Georgetown, we played Providence, we played Syracuse, we played Villanova, and we thought we were going to be chosen when the head coach of Providence, I can't think of his name now, but he was a Providence coach for many years. He sent us to Yugoslavia to play basketball, and we went over there. We played. We were there for a week, and it was a successful trip. Except our best player didn't play. Greg Sanders was hurt. We had Earl Belcher. We had Glenn Hagan. We had a good team. They had won the NIT in '77. They went back to the NIT in '79. So, we've had for a small school, we've got a great many postseason tournaments. Yeah. And I take pride in one fact, that I was the only person who was on as a coach or a player for about 11 of postseason games. I was around the longest. It's just by virtue, being Eddie's assistant and Larry's assistant and Jimmy's assistant, and I was the assistant. But it opened up, going to Yugoslavia. I was invited to come back and coach in Yugoslavia, and for a great many years I coached what they call odbrana. Odbrana means defense. Kontranapad means fast break. I learned Croatian, and my wife spoke Polish, so Croatian wasn't much different. And then I coached in Italy and in Poland. And so I had a great career overall in coaching.
We're almost running out of tape, actually, because I think that's only like an hour. Would you like to do this again? Can we possibly sit down and discuss some more stuff?
Yeah, I could discuss more stuff. I could discuss a lot of stuff that I can't discuss. The politics. I was offered a job here 3 times. Okay. I didn't take it. Okay. I was offered a job twice in the NBA. Once in New York, once in Buffalo. And I didn't take it. I didn't take the NBA because I had 5 children. And I loved Olean, and I didn't want to leave my wife. You know, the NBA is not a, you know, I could have gone with Frank Layden. He said, if you ever want to coach, you know, he was in New Orleans. But I set an agenda in my life, and that the agenda called for me retiring at 55. Okay. I wanted to be retired at 55 and live, and so I retired in 1988. Yeah, I could come back and fill in if you want to. If you have to pick up other questions and go back over some of those things, because it's. I mean, a lot of people don't know Chuck Daly went here. You know Chuck Daly? No.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great coach, great defensive coach. Yeah, coached Isaiah Thomas. In Detroit, and he was from Kane, New York, right down the road. He, you know, I could, you know, talk about the coaches that I work with.
Yeah. What was it like? Like, you were here doing a linear, and I mean, what was that? Can you like kind of describe a little bit what that season was like, going to the Final Four, and just how good? Like, do you remember the first time you ever saw Lanier play in Buffalo? I
saw Lanier when he was 295 pounds in Butler Gymnasium, and I said, oh my God, is he big? And I said, but he's going to have to lose some weight. You know, they used to have tryouts. An interesting sidelight about Lanier is that he had 118 IQ. Canisius turned him down for a scholarship. He didn't meet their requirements. 118 IQ. Well, you know, a kid with that ability, given the opportunity, will be able to do it. He was an excellent student here. But they put it in the newspaper to rub it in our nose. And so we were fortunate to get Lanier. Greg Sanders, he played high school basketball for John Thompson. They coached.
Went on to Georgetown.
Yeah. John and I were friends. I went to see. Greg left St. Anthony's, where Thompson was coach, because he couldn't get along with Thompson. Greg was a free spirit, and he didn't want to be told what to do. So he went to another school, and I recruited him from this other school, and I went to see him play a postseason game, and Greg's guardian, Mel, his name was sitting here. On the other side was John Thompson, and we're talking back and forth, and never talking about what school he's going to go to, but he knew, you know, we both knew it was one or the other. And Thompson left for a minute, and I said, Mel, he hasn't made up his mind? He says, don't worry, I made up his mind. He's going to Bonaventure. Easiest recruiting I ever did.
What was that like? Like, what was it like trying? Like, how would you find out initially about these players?
Well, Greg, in those days, we didn't have what they have now. We've gone through a number of things. We've gone through a period where we used to get information from alumni. When Eddie Donovan was coach, 2 FBI guys were his recruiters in New York. They tried to, and the one was Eddie's roommate. The guy lives in Olean right now. He's back here and married. He was the quarterback on a football team, and he's from Elizabeth, and he was Eddie's roommate, and he went out and as an FBI man, and they go up the door and say, FBI, and we're here to see your son about basketball. rather impressive entry, you know. And then what we did, actually there were always alumni from the 40s up through Eddie's time, Larry's time. Larry had an alumni who violated an NCAA rule. And as a result of that, that's a big story I could give you about that. As a result of that, we were sanctioned by the NCAA Lanier's junior year. If you look at the record, we were 17-7.
Yeah.
And prior to that, we had a good year his sophomore year. We had a good year his senior year. But in the year that we couldn't go to a tournament, we just didn't play as well. And the guy was one of the greatest Bonaventure boosters ever. He deserves a plaque in the Hall of Fame because he recruited all of Larry's players that got him to the NCAA. He recruited Lanier. He recruited Gant. He recruited... I'll tell you a little side story I wouldn't put on tape was Ben says, you know, this guy's got a trucking business. If I buy him a truck, maybe we can get him. And Larry said, are you crazy? We're not buying a truck for anyone, you know. Ben used to come here and he'd take the whole team out to the castle to eat. It was legal in those days. He was very free with his money.
I just wonder if there's any, or if we've run out.
Good.
He was very free with his money. He just loved Bonaventure. He was from Scranton. He would go out on his own and go all over. He had two guys that were his assistants, Ron Dunn and Jack Dunn. So that was the group that was recruiting when they got in trouble. They hired me to straighten out the recruiting and make sure there'd be no violations. I had to take care of the academics of incoming basketball player and athletic ability and make sure they were not doing anything illegal. One was work for the Department of Army Audit Agency in Washington, and he would just walk into a high school, which you could never do now, and say, hi, I'm here to recruit Greg Sanders. Can you give me a what do you call those things? They said, no, not a resume.
Transcript.
Transcript. I'd like a transcript of their grades, and I'd give him a transcript, and he'd look at the grades and find out he was a good player, and he'd go see him play. Never did anything in the way of exchanging money with kids, but that's what you had. And Ben would do the same thing. And then there was a guy who was a farmer over here, who now has a big business in Buffalo, and he would take off recruiting, and many of the times they would go with me after that. Whenever they wanted to go see someone, I'd go with them. And whenever I wanted to go see someone, I would take whoever was available because they were our leg men that would be able to do things that I couldn't do because I was working as a teacher. So they thought nothing of going to Buffalo and going into Kensington and getting Lanier's resume, and not resume, transcript. And we got it, and we accepted him, and Canisius didn't. There were a variety of things done with how you can accept a basketball player. There was always, and still has been, when UCLA won all of those championships, they had a separate curriculum for basketball players. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Now, no one wants to put... And this came out in the Scholastic Coaches magazine. They set up a different entrance requirements for a different curriculum for... And there was a lot of cheating. I mean, we had a 6'11" kid wanted to come here. came to see us 5 times, and then Tennessee come in. And I said to Larry, you got $1,000 to give this kid? He said, why? I said, he's adopted. He has no clothes. He wears the same clothes all the time. He has no money. Tennessee's going to give him money. Boy, after he visited Tennessee, Michael Dunleavy, you know, the one that coaches in the pros?
Yeah.
I recruited him in New York City his junior year. We brought him to the NIT. His coach was a friend of mine who played at St. John's. No one was after him, and his senior year, he became so great that South Carolina came in. South Carolina was Frank McGuire. They got all the Catholic high school basketball players they wanted out of New York City. They had an arrangement down there with a booster club that provided things, you know.
Yeah.
The things that the NCAA, that's why the NCAA, now everything is AAU.
Yeah.
We used to use high school coaches, high school counselors, and that's the way it operated then. Lately, I don't know how many years, the AAU teams that play all summer, what they did recruiting times, you can only recruit certain times, and other times you can't. So they get lined up with these AAA coaches, and they follow those kids through the AAU coach, and whenever they can go see them, they go see them play. And I don't know how or when they can do that, but when this coach came here, I said, do you want an international connection for basketball recruiting? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'll find you a guy in Serbia where the best basketball players come out of, Croatia and Canada. I said, I'm not going to be involved, but so I sent him to Serbia. He met all the coaches over there. The guy, after that I got out of it, and the guy who was the connection, his brother is the coach of the under-19 Serbian basketball team, which always wins.
Yeah.
Always wins. And I don't. Years ago, I wanted to recruit. You know, I'm talking when Jimmy Satalin was coaching. I was working in Yugoslavia, and the vice president, I told him about it. He says, "Well, go over there." I said, "Well, what?" "Well, go over there." I said, "I need money. I can't afford to, send my money on it." We should have been recruiting over there in the 70s. I mean, I recruited. I knew many great Serbian basketball players that played, still are playing in the pros. Vladi Divac from Serbia. There was a kid that died. He was from Croatia, and not Pekanovic, but he played for the New Jersey Nets, and he got killed over in a car wreck. What I was doing when I was coaching the junior teams. They had the senior team. I was coaching the 19 and under in all these places and teaching defense, and it was a wide open market, but they didn't want to go for it. Maybe the money or.
I think that's probably part of it, because it's so much, but.
Many times, and I can live very inexpensively. I can get a beautiful hotel in Slovakia with a breakfast that had a table 28 feet long with the breakfast meal, $50 a night.
That's nice.
Or I could go to a college dorm through a friend of mine. He put me up to college dorm. he says, it's cheap. I says, how much? $12 a night with breakfast. So I can still go to Europe, and I know where to go. I had a job as a, what would you call it? I was a consultant for what do they call those things? A concrete mixer company. And I worked over there, and we traveled over there. I traveled with one consultant. He went home, and we laid the groundwork, and then the other boss, the head man, flew over, and we were buying steel and buying fabricated parts, and so made $50 an hour, which was
not bad,
but it was a tough job. I mean, it was a long day, but to find the guy was the second largest concrete mixer place in the United States. He had one in Springville, he had one in Virginia, and he had one in, I learned the whole concrete business about how it operates and what, but so I know my way around Europe. That's why they hired me, and I know where to go for. I have enough friends that I could call anyone and tell them I need a room for $50 or less.
Okay. That's beautiful. What?
What, are you on the faculty here, or?
No, I'm a JMC student, a senior.
You
I
what?
just dressed up because, out of courtesy for you.
Oh, no. What are you majoring in?
Journalism, mass
Oh!
communications. Yeah.
You know who was going to write a book with me?
Hinch? Which one?
Mike Vaccaro.
Oh, really? Good.
He's going to write a book with me about Bonaventure and spill the beans. Spill all the politics. I said, Mike. I mean, I told him a lot of stories. I said, but this is not for publication. And he got a good job with the New York Post now.
Yeah.
He's from...
I met him actually 2 years ago when he came down for the Dick Joyce Sports Symposium.
Oh, yeah.
He came back for that.
Yeah. Mike had heart trouble already. He doesn't even go to the Post. He works out of his house. He told me I can come down any time to see a Mets game. I said, I'm a Yank fan. He's a very bright guy. He started out of journalism out west somewhere, and he was a good writer, obviously, and then he came east, and then he came further east, and the next thing I know, he's with the Post. And one of his best friends is my son-in-law, who was also a journalism major, and he is at Christopher Newport University. What are you, a senior?
Yeah.
Have you
I used to write for the BV actually, and as of right now, I really don't have like a lot. I mean, I'm talking to people. I've gone to some job interviews, but nothing's concrete yet.
Yeah.
Like nothing.
You gotta know someone.
Yeah.
You gotta know. I mean, I'll ask my son-in-law. There's a journal put out by an association of sports information directors.
I'll have to look into it. Yeah.
I'll find it out for you, and
that would be.
I'll tell you, it lists all the jobs that are open. Yeah. And I'll ask him if he's got anything where he works, or if he knows of any, because he's been in the business. He's at a school that's twice as large as Bonaventure, Christopher Newport University. You never heard of it.
No.
It's a Division III school, and he's got a nice job there. He was a radio man for WHDL. Now he does the radio for football and basketball at the university. He's in charge of ads, raising money, putting out the... What do you call it?
Media guy.
The media guy, and I'll ask Francis. He's a good guy.
Thank you.
He knows an awful lot of people. You never know. He might know of a place that's open or someone that he knows that's looking for someone. It's tough. Most of it's my grandson's in sports management. And he wants a job when he gets out, obviously. And my best friend's son is the president of Green Bay Packers now, Mark Murphy. So I'm dealing with Mark on getting him an internship with the Packers, and he's a Packers fan. And Mark used to recruit with me and go to scout basketball games. He was playing for the Redskins at the time. He went from there to law school, from law school to AD at Colgate, then AD at Northwestern. Too bad he's not there. I don't know if they use journalists, but...
No, I'm sure they do. Northwestern's program for communications is...
Oh.
Yeah.
Why he left Northwestern, I used to sit on the side of the GW games, scouting, and he'd be sitting next to me signing autographs the whole game. People, would come down. He was quite a player. Well, I'll give my son-in-law a call, see whether he knows, or ask him. It's good to talk. Maybe you could talk to him.
Okay.
You're Italian, he's Italian, I'm Italian.
Okay.
Your family at home speak Italian at all?
No. Yeah. My dad tried learning a few years ago.
You thought it'd be too young.
Yeah.
You'd have to be in your 60s to... I spoke it when I was a kid. And then I lost it.
Yeah.
And then I got it back when I went to work in Italy. But all of what I said was not comprehensible. They would say, how they play that? You go like this and say, Napolitan. Don't speak Napolitan. Napolitan is, to give you the easiest thing, the common greeting in my neighborhood was, hey, Gizzardich. Gizzardich in northern Italy is come si dice. So I'd say Gizzardich, and they'd laugh and say, no, Napolitan, or, and the dialects are so different.
Yeah.
You ought to go to Sicily. I've never been there, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Best food. Oh.
I want to try. We just need you to say that we can use this. We're just going to use this for the website. We're going to use clips of it, and we're also going to fill in on the website.
Oh, there's nothing on there that I...
Yeah, we're not going to make you...
It's just for antiquities, right? For those who want to look at it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr.
All right, now who's going to come and get those films from me?